Boom Z, a conversation between generations. With a changing world today, it's become exceedingly important that there be a relationship between all generations. We live in an ever-changing world, and it will take the strengths of all generations to make a positive impact on our society.
And good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to Boom Z Podcast. My name is Slammin' Sammy Hamlin.
And I'm Nina Jabril, and this is the conversation between generations. Please always make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and share to any friends or family that you think would like to see our show. And if you ever have any questions you want us to answer or you would like to be on the show, you can contact us at askus@boomzpodcast.com.
And what we got today?
Today we are joined by Miss Lisa Smith via Zoom, who is a Gen Z teacher who's been a teacher for almost over 40 years. And right now she runs her own pod school out in Asheville. So, Miss Smith, to the viewers that may not know what a pod school is, could you kind of explain like the dynamic and all that you do?
I sure can. Pod school is what we call it. These days I hear the term micro school being thrown around a lot. It is simply a small school outside of the public school system. Our pod school is in my home, a lot in a classroom I've made outdoors, as well as we use part of the indoor part of the house. I currently have around 11 or 12 students. They vary in ages from about third grade to about eighth grade. And so we school in a really different structure, but we hit the main subjects of, math and English and reading and writing in a similar curriculum, but with a very different structure.
And how long have you been doing this?
I will be starting the 5th year of a micro school in my home.
Okay, that's a pretty good little while. Yeah. What's some of the challenges you've had just getting it organized?
Well, certainly with an extremely broad and open structure, just figuring out my structure, figuring out my rubric, is definitely part of getting going. I guess what I also have the benefit of is being completely adjustable. So if something's not working, I can adjust it right now today. And so, kind of setting our norms has taken a little while to find out the best practices. But also I really appreciate that flexibility.
What is the main benefit do you think comes from a pod school being in home? Like what that kids in public school don't get?
I tend to service kids who aren't a great fit for public school, and often they are either behind or ahead and not kind of right in the middle. And so there are a lot of times those challenges are academic. Also, sometimes they're social. And kids who socially might not fit in with the norms of public school. I tend to have kids who might work at a different structure than sitting at a desk. I might have a student who's doing their math in a tree instead of sitting at a desk. Sometimes it's that openness that allows students learning. I also have like I say, a different rubric. And so the goals for succeeding may not be always in a test score. They might be in, having a comfortable day or learning what there is to learn, but maybe not so structured like it would be in the public school system.
This show is Boom Z. It's about a conversation between the generations. You've been doing this through the last at least 3 generations, millennials, Gen Zs, and now the alphas. What have you noticed as far as a difference between those groups, their learning ability, maybe their habits?
I think definitely over time, I see more of an openness, more of a flexibility, all of us approaching education with a little more openness than the, sort of sit at desks structure that we had. Certainly I grew up with. And even for my own children homeschooling, I had them, they weren't sitting at desks, but they were sitting at the kitchen table in a rather structured way. I think I myself open up to more paths to getting toward the learning. And I think our whole culture is opening up more about what the paths are to get at learning and what is it that we need to know. What do we need to know as we're growing up, and what's core in that? I think that's evolving. I think that is evolving a lot more quickly in the alternative learning community than it is in the public school system, because that is a strong structure that's tricky to change.
To piggyback to that, you said, I can feel it. What you're saying is it's getting loose, a little looser, a little more flexible with the younger generations. Do you think it's a benefit when I say it is the structured learning versus the not as structured?
I think there are benefits and challenges to both paths. I do think as we open up a little bit more, there is in general a benefit to reach a more broad audience, to have a more broad definition of what success is. And it might not have to be on a standardized test score. We might find success in other areas, and we might value different skills. And so I think it is more successful to be more broad in our education. Yet I think we can't just be extremely broad. We still need foundational skills. It still is a benefit for a student to be able to know their math facts solidly.
Yeah.
It helps.
So my question is, what are other things aside from academics you focus on? Because there's a lot of building blocks to building up a person and child and things. So what other things do you work on?
Definitely. I think social emotional learning is something that I am able to really help address. I find that working in collaboration and building community, I think those are both things that happen in the public school. But I have a smaller community, and it has a real way of holding people accountable, because in a group of a dozen or somewhere between 10 and 15 people, it's less easy to slip through the cracks. Mm-hmm. I've had a couple kids who struggle in community. Honestly, I think it's because they want to get attention, because they don't have enough attention, and so they're doing kind of attention-getting behaviors. Maybe like writing on the wall, or putting a leaf in a kid's water at lunch, or, something slightly devious, right, to get attention. But in a small community, it's pretty obvious who's doing that. And the student kind of gets called out, not really just by nature of being in a
held
small
accountable.
Group. Yes, held accountable, right? And so when we're all, and I really work at that, when our community thrives, when everybody thrives. I had a student in summer camp wanted to get all the good stuff first, so their project was cooler than everybody else's. And, while that makes somebody feel good in the moment, how does that make the whole community feel? And when we talk about that, we're all stronger when we're all stronger. It comes out in these little instances. Mm-hmm. And I think it really is successful. I have had a good handful of students I've really turned around in their community behavior by being in our small community. And I think that leads to more personal confidence, and then sort of better social environment, and a happier, more balanced individual. So,
I've heard you in that last statement talk about small community 2 or 3 times. You're from an Asheville area, which is a much more rural area than, say, in Atlanta or New York or Charlotte even. How do you think those teaching methods would work in those larger communities where you're going to have a much more diverse participation?
Well, I think the goal, at least for me, is to break down into smaller communities. Whether, if we're in a large community, we can make pods within that, where people feel seen and recognized and known. I also think that in a large city is actually a great place to start a micro school or a pod school, because you can gather a small group of people who have similar interests or similar needs. For example, in our micro school, partly because it's my background, we do filmmaking. And I teach kids to make movies. But it could be, any sort of specific interest that maybe it's kids that want to learn Japanese, or with a focus in arts, or who are all on a soccer team, or, some sort of unifying factor. And then it's actually legally very simple to set it up. You're simply just you need a good teacher. You need good adult presence, right? That really matters. And so, but that environment could be set up anywhere. And I think in a big city, actually, you have a lot of people to draw from. And so I think it's very possible just to create your own small group.
So you said you have kids from third grade to eighth. Is it just you with them? That's do they all do kind of the same subject at the same time? How do you monitor them?
How do you put that together? So yeah. I typically have either one or two assistants. If I'll have, I try to keep us in groups of 5 or 6 kids to an adult. So if I go over about a dozen kids, then I'll have a third person there, so that we have a lot of adult support. And then it really depends on subject. So in math and English, all kids are doing their own work. They're all sort of assessed and working at their own level. I think schoolwork really needs to be basically at the right spot, just a little bit challenging. If it's too hard, you get lost. And if it's too easy, you're bored. And so you got to find that sweet spot for every student where they're engaged. With subjects like history and science and music and filmmaking, we work collaboratively in a large group. And I do make, for example, science worksheets might be a little more rigorous for a middle school student than they would be for an elementary student, or I'll give an elementary student a middle school worksheet and not require that they fill it out completely, but that they're following along at that level of what's going on. It kind of depends on what the science is. They might not have quite the writing requirement that an older student would, but we're working on projects all together with mixed ages. And I certainly find that, we don't all have the same skill level at the same age and the same subject. So by using mixed ages, some students really excel, and as a group, we're achieving something. So science experiments, history projects, those are all done collaboratively across ages, and math and English are all individual.
It sounds like your kids are really getting a pretty solid education. I don't know a lot about it, but is homeschooling pretty much national?
It is regulated by the state, and it is legal in all of our states, but it varies state to state. For example, California will provide families with financial resources for homeschooling. And some states make it quite tricky because of the testing and sort of regulatory environment. So it definitely varies state to state, but it is national.
And what do you think is the percentage of students who actually do homeschooling, as far as the global number in the United States, not worldwide?
National number?
Yes.
It used to be extremely rare when I homeschooled my own kids some decades ago. It was quite unusual, and it is becoming, certainly with COVID, a lot more common since then. But I would say it's hitting percentages now. I don't know if it's 6 or 7 or 8%. I might guess something like that. I also know that colleges used to be really challenged by homeschool students, and how you would create assessments for them, and what their transcript looked like were all really big issues. And now colleges actually appreciate homeschool students. It's instead of being a check against you, it's kind of a check for you these days. They're far more open. So I think though our whole culture is becoming more open to it. I still think overall the percentage numbers are pretty low.
Do you think high schoolers, like, I guess going from like 15 to 18 would benefit a lot from it too? Because I'm thinking back, like, there was some times in high school we could have class outside, and like being 17, we were so excited about it. So I can only imagine like having like a full day like that every day.
It's a real mix. And certainly at the high school level, like all of our school is kind of more important at the high school level because people are keeping track of things and you're using it to go on. And so for a homeschooler as well, you have to use that kind of accountability. Sometimes parents aren't so comfortable teaching the hard sciences. So students are taking those things at community colleges, or like when my kids were in school, we hired a local university professor to create that class for a group of students. So I think in the high school level, it depends what your student's into, but you might share that responsibility with the community more. But that freedom that you have of sleeping in, maybe choosing your hours, maybe doing your work when you're more focused, having some buy-in about what you really want to do, being able to go to a welding or a blacksmithing class because you think that's really cool, or travel with your soccer team and just take your math with you, or there's a lot of flexibility in all of that. And I think that flexibility is really rewarding for almost all students, and definitely at the high school age.
And I think that builds like structure and responsibility too, because you have all that freedom as soon as you go to college. And like me, I could say I wasn't prepared for it. So I think if like starting at high school, that'd have been really good. And I have one more question, and it's if you could, like, what is one thing advice you would give a teacher that's in a school setting that would help them with, like, from what you do? Like,
you know, one of the biggest pieces I find that's really different about my school setting than public school setting is how we use technology. And I don't have a computer for every student exactly. Sometimes students are writing, sometimes they're bringing their own computers. I do have 5 or 6 computers for my classroom, but we don't do core curriculum on there, and we don't use them consumptively. And so in almost every public school student has a computer. Almost every student is on the computer, but they are following a click and play. They are following along of some program that's given to them. And what I think is extremely empowering, it's our media literacy, I think, is probably our most important literacy these days. We don't really even consider it or study it as a literacy, but we consume it like crazy. And so I'm really big on teaching kids creative use of technology. And that could really happen in the public school, where they're creating audio recordings, they are making videos, they are writing on the computer as a tool, but it's all creative use. I have no consumptive use of technology and all creative use of technology. And in using technology creatively, I think that's the power to understand it. That's how to break down fake news, is to understand how it's made, to understand the meaning of an edit. You can put 2 things next to each other and create a new meaning that wasn't there. If we're just using that and not understanding it, I think we're building a sort of media illiterate culture. And so I think in the public school, you could use technology creatively, even at the very youngest levels. Get kids recording their voices, get them making up. You know, we don't so much need poster boards anymore for our science fairs and stuff. We need animations and podcasts.
I got one last question.
Like that.
Do you teach cursive?
I do. I do. I think it's foundational and fundamental, for one thing, to just make our hands work. Our hands are these amazing tools, right? And they have all these bajillion little muscles in there. And so, you know, you will build strong hands that will be able to knit or turn a wrench or do all of these amazing other things by developing fine motor skills. And so cursive is a beautiful way to do that. It also preserves our heart. And in the idea of writing a letter, creating a signature, it's another form of literacy that I think we're waning on.
Well, we have really, really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Absolutely.
And Lisa, thank you so much. Maybe we can get you back again sometime. And you were very informative to me, because I've got a niece that did pod school, and she was real successful college student, but I didn't really understand it. So you really opened my eyes to it too.
Yeah, and before you go, for the people who may see this and be like inspired, where could they go to find more information on it, like in their counties or?
There are several national organizations these days that support micro schooling. And so if you Google micro school, you will find organizations that will help you set that up. I'd also be happy for anyone to reach out to me. My name is Lisa Smith. I have a website called Lisa Smith Teaches, and I have a contact form on there. I'd be happy for anybody to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Oh, awesome.
We'll be sure to put that on the screen so everybody can see it. So, well, thank you again so much for joining us. I appreciate it. And, this is a Boomsy podcast, Nina.
Yep, and I'm Nina Jabril. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you guys next Wednesday.
It's a TEM joint.